Hey everybody, as you probably know, Zoom bombing, or as they're being called, Zombies, are now a thing. Uninvited guests are coming into our Zoom classrooms and disrupting, sometimes sharing inappropriate material through screen shares or in the chats. And now that this is a thing, we've got to talk about security in Zoom for our classrooms. Now, our goal as educators is to allow students to enter a room, a Zoom room, whether it's our actual virtual classroom or real classroom, with the fewest barriers as possible, but also keep security high, of course, and make sure that it's a healthy environment for everybody involved. So taking a student-centric approach, we don't want to impose a whole bunch of restrictions right away that makes it so students have difficulty entering the room, right? But we need to think about how certain settings or parameters can maybe go from least restrictive to most restrictive, and so that we know what tools are available to us so that we can set up our rooms in a way that will work. So I'm going to go through about 14 tips actually. So I'm going to list them all right here. You can see what I'm going to talk about. You can scan ahead if you want to, if there's certain things that you're curious about where to find them. But I'm just going to walk through, talk about where you find the settings and what the setting does in these different things. Some of them are just tips versus settings, but I'm going to walk through them right now, and hopefully this will help you set up a healthy classroom environment online in Zoom. So as you can see here, I've got 14 tips, and they move from the less restrictive up at the top to the more restrictive at the bottom. And as I said, from an educational standpoint, we don't want to make it super restrictive for students. We don't want to limit the students we want in there coming into our classroom. So I would suggest start with the ones at the top, work your way down, and then know that these other ones are available to you so that you can enact them if you need to later on. And I'm just going to go through them one by one, and we're going to talk about them. So number one is make sure you are signed in as the host and understand how to manage participants. So this is kind of two parts. In order to manage participants, you need to be signed in as the host. Now, you can see up here, if you launch the Zoom app, you can see my little face up there. And if I click on there, you can see that I'm signed in. I'm going to sign out so you can see what this looks like. The screen looks like this. You can either sign in over here with your username, sign in. For people at most educational institutions, including my own, UK, we sign in with SSO. I put in my company domain, which at University of Kentucky is UKY, and then it will take me to a sign-in screen and allow me to sign in with my UKY address. Once you are signed in on the app on your computer, then it means that whenever you launch a Zoom meeting that you are signed in. The second part of this, of course, is knowing how to manage the participants. Now, I'm not going to go into all the managing aspects of students right now, but you can look up some of my other videos or other people's videos. The biggest things is you need to be able to view where the participants are, and be able to mute them, to be able to put them on hold, to be able to remove them. And so managing the participants. Number two is never use your personal meeting ID or Zoom link. This is your personal meeting ID. I'll show you where you would find that. So if you are signed in to your Zoom account, you'll see your information up at the top. I am blurring out a bunch of my information for security reasons, of course. And then under here, you will see a personal meeting ID, which is looks like a phone number. And it would show up as well in the link there, as well as a personal link that you can personalize. Great idea, but unfortunately, if it gets out there in the wild, then it could be that anybody could log into these Zoom meetings. So never use your personal meeting ID. And that brings us to point number three, which is never publicly post a Zoom link. This is really, you see a lot of the stories out there right now. This is the biggest reason, is that people are inviting whomever into these Zoom meetings. They're putting them on Twitter or Facebook. So that's a no-no. Let's just not put our personal meetings out there in a public way and send them just directly to your students instead. And tip number 4, do not allow removed participants to rejoin. You will find this under your Settings tab, and right at the very bottom of In-Meeting Basic, or you can click on In-Meeting Advanced and then scroll up just a little bit. you will find the setting allow removed participants to rejoin. Now, on one side, if you kick somebody out by accident, then they're not going to be able to come in, which is unfortunate. However, if you have removed somebody, if they have the link, unfortunately, they can just keep coming back in again and again and again if you don't have this disabled. So I would recommend number 4, do not allow removed participants to rejoin. Number 5 is turn off join before host. Now you can set this. Some of the settings are in 2 different places, either in your general settings or in the meeting setting themselves. So I'm going to flip back and forth between them. You can also do a few of these settings in the active meeting itself, in the active Zoom room. So this one is found by scrolling all the way up here to the top. And you can see here, join before a host. Allow participants to join the meeting before the host arrives. You could turn this off globally, and this would mean that no one would be able to join any of your meetings before you arrived. Or you could go to your individual meeting, and right down at the bottom here, you can enable join before a host. When I edit this meeting, I can disable that and then save. So number 5, turn off join before host. Number 6, and this is a big one, is restrict screen sharing to the host. Again, you can do this in a couple different places. Again, on the settings tab, if I go to in meeting basic, scroll down to about the middle, you can see a little area here for screen sharing, and it asks allow host and participants to share their screen or content during meetings. And I can leave it on and just allow host only. Now, this means that only you as a host can share your screen, obviously, but it also means that you can apply the host setting or invite someone else to be a host or a co-host, and also allow them to share their screen. This is great for presentations or whatever that you need to do to allow students then to share their screen. You know, this is just probably good practice anyways, because it could be so easy for somebody to click on a screen by accident or whatever, and that's probably not a very good thing. In terms of sharing screen restrictions, if you forgot to do that once you've started your meeting, you can actually change the setting in the meeting itself as well. If you do this up arrow right here, you can go to advanced sharing options, and you can switch it between all participants and only host, or the reverse. Maybe you have it set up so it's only the host and you want other people to participate, and you can change that there. So number 6, restrict screen sharing to the host. Number 7, turn off allow participants to use annotation tools. And it's right down below this one right here, okay? What this means is, and a lot of people don't even realize that this is on by default, that when a screen is shared, anyone can pick up a pen and write on top of the screen if this is on. I kind of think this is a crazy setting just to have left on, and is one of the things that have gotten a number of these presentations, is doctoral dissertation presentations, in trouble, is allowing annotation to happen. So go ahead and turn off the annotation tools, and you can turn it back on another time if that's really something that you're using, but a lot of people aren't using that anyways. So it's number 7, turn off allow participants to use annotation tools. Number 8 is turn off allow participants to share whiteboard. So this is really separate from the screen sharing, that they could still select the whiteboard and share that to use. And so I think just go ahead and turn that one off. Again, you could share co-hosting privileges with somebody else if you need them to share a screen or a whiteboard. So these first 8 were restrictive, but actually not that restrictive if you think about it. You know, these are probably good things just to put in place anyways, and it's probably not going to limit any student from coming into your room and having a positive experience in your Zoom classroom. So I would just go ahead and do those first 8 for my meetings, and then think about these next the next 6 here, and what of these maybe need to be enabled to add just another level of security. So the next is number 9, enabling the waiting room. What this means basically is every time you can either set it globally again or in your meeting, and every time it means that students are put or other participants are put into a waiting room, and then you let them join individually. And you just select them to come on in. So the global settings are down here in the in-meeting advanced settings. You can see that I can turn globally a waiting room on for all my meetings. From here then, you can also see that all participants or just guest participants. What this means is that people that have not signed in would be considered a guest. You can also click on here and you can modify what that meeting room would look like. Put a logo there, you can put a meeting topic, you can let them know this is the right class or whatever you want to do. You can also set the waiting room in the specific meeting itself. You can see here again at the bottom, enable waiting room. When I edit this meeting, I can toggle that on or off and save it for specific meetings. So that's number 9, enable the waiting room. Number 10, lock the meeting after you begin. A lot of people don't realize that you can do this, but you do this from the Zoom app itself once the meeting has started, assuming that different participants have come in. And then you would click on Manage Participants. Over here on the far right, under More, the very bottom, you can lock the meeting. This means no new attendees can join this meeting once it is locked. You can do yes. You can go back and unlock it too. New attendees can join this meeting once unlocked. If it turns out that you've left somebody out and they're trying to get in or whatever. What a great tool to have in meeting. This is typically what we do in our schools anyways, right? So the class starts, the door closes, and then we can start. And if students know this is an expectation as well, it means that they will show up on time, and it will prevent somebody from just kind of jumping in the middle of a meeting and disrupting anything. So number 10, lock the meeting before you begin. Number 11 is create a password for your meetings. Now you can do this either in the global settings or in the individual meeting settings. So in the global settings, once you've clicked on settings, you can click on schedule meeting and scroll down just a little bit, and you will see require a password when scheduling new meetings. And this will just make it a default every time you generate a new meeting. You could also turn on the passwords for instant meetings. That's when you kind of launch a meeting from your app, or require a password for when you're using your personal meeting ID. And this is not a bad idea, just to put on anyways, so that if you're using your personal meeting ID, then you can just tell people what the password is. You can also set this in the meeting itself. You can see right under here, right now I do not have it set. So when I go under Edit, I can click on Require Meeting Password, and you can put in whatever password you want to. Something probably a little more secure than that. So that's number 11, create a password for your meetings. Number 12 is allow only authenticated users. Now, this can be either set up in the global settings or in the meeting settings. In the global settings, if you click on Schedule Meeting, it will be right down here. What this means that if you click that on is that participants will need to be signed in somehow to Zoom. Now, this wouldn't necessarily be signed in to your particular institution, but they would have to be signed in some way to Zoom. And just a little bit of kind of vetting of people. It means that somebody can't just come in as an anonymous guest. You can also set this in the meeting settings right down here at the bottom to allow authenticated users to join. That's number 12, only allowing authenticated users. Now we're getting really restrictive. Number 13, force registration for meetings. And this is only in the meeting settings. In the meeting settings, you can see here, because I have a recurring meeting, I actually don't have that option. In order to have that option, you have to have a date and time set up for it. And then you'll see an option for registration and click on required. When I save this, you can see here now it has created a registration URL for people to click on to join and register. We can copy the invitation there. If I click on that, you can see what it looks like. It gives me a place to put in my first name and last name, email address, and then confirm that you're not a robot. No robots allowed. So that's forcing registration for meetings. And the very last one is locking down the chat. Now, we're trying to get students engaged, right? So one of the ways that students can do this is by offering up some questions during the chat. Maybe they don't want to speak on camera. Maybe they have a question. They don't want to interrupt you. And so I hate to do this, but at the same time, there may be situations in which you feel more comfortable doing this. A couple different ways to doing this. One is less preferable because maybe you don't have as much control over it overall. So you can do that. Go to your settings and your in-meeting basic options. You can allow participants to send message visible to all participants or not. And it's just telling you there's some other functions that kind of rely on this, and you can turn them off or you can turn it on. You can also turn off private chat. Now this probably is more important for like K to 12. Maybe you don't want students chatting back and forth with each other and missing what's happening in the instructional time. And you can turn off the private chat there. The other place that you can do this is in the app itself. If you click on the chat button, this is assuming that you're signed in as a host. Over on the very far right, you can see participants can chat with no one, host only, everyone publicly, and privately. 4 different levels that you can change it to. So you can do that once you've started the chat or once you've started your meeting up, and maybe there's too much going on in terms of chat, or you feel like there is, and you can just go over and you can just turn that off and then turn it back on again at another point. So that's another option for number 14. All right, well, I know that was a lot of points, 14 points. And if you made it this far, you know a lot more about Zoom security than you did a few minutes ago. Hopefully these are helpful. If you have questions, please leave them in the chat below. I'll put these points as well as some links to the official Zoom tutorials on some of these things down below in the notes as well. So let me know how it goes out there. Happy Zooming.